Okay, let's wait 15 more seconds. All right, let's start. Thank you all for joining, well, the session in general. It's very nice to have you all here. And especially thank you for joining this little breakout session in which we will learn about a little bit of different topic than the other groups. We will hear about the role of technology in the context of tenure from Ashwini Chatra, who is from the Indian Business School, right? Indian School of Business. I'm very sorry. Okay, and without further ado, let's give the word to Ashwini and have a good presentation.
Thank you, Felix. I'm very excited to be here and share some of the work that we are doing. I do believe whatever we are doing has a much wider application, and it will be of interest to a lot of people. It's not ready for prime time yet, but will be very soon. I will make 5 points in 10 minutes, 4 about technology, and the 5th about a larger vision that it supports. The 4 aspects that we believe we are using technology to sustain tenure is the following. I'll just go through each of these points one by one. The first is that there is already a large and vast forest economy. There is a large amount of resources that are being extracted from forests. And the first mile of this production is completely invisible. It is in the informal economy. And just in India, our estimate is 200 million people extract forest resources and sell them in local markets. But these are all invisible cash transactions. So it's very hard to trace and literally impossible to account for. That means these transactions cannot become part of the formal economy. They cannot be used as collateral. They cannot be converted into capital and cannot lead to increases in surplus and value that is created locally and sustained locally. So one of the important contributions of technology is converting informal economies to formal economies through processes of record keeping where we use digital technology to record these transactions and then work with local actors, both government and private sector, to make sure that the economy becomes visible and that it's formal, that it is recognized, and therefore it becomes possible for communities to use their contributions to the economy to sustain their political capital that they get from tenure. So this is the first step after tenure, to formalize the economy of the resources that are already being extracted. This is nothing new, it is already happening. But by formalizing it using digital technology for record keeping and then making it visible, we make it possible for communities to build on this resource and not just gain further recognition as economic actors, but also gain access to resources like government subsidies, working capital, private sector investments, and so on. The second major element of technology that we are using is to increase productivity. A lot of this informal economy in the forest actually leads to industrial value chains and outputs. A lot of resources that are being extracted are present in our homes in the form of ingredients in shampoos and soaps and face creams and wild foods and medicinal herbs and natural products and so on. What we want to do is reduce the drudgery, because a lot of these, because it is in the informal economy, is using Stone Age tools, literally. So the technology is available, but because of the lack of economies of scale, it is not viable. So we want to use mechanization to increase productivity and create value at the local level. So when communities gain tenure, they have the opportunity to collectivize the resources that were previously being collected and sold individually, and invest in simple technologies that stop using and move on from Stone Age tools into at least equipment and technologies that were available in the 19th century, if not the 21st. The third major intervention in technology that we are making is to help communities who have gained tenure with mapping their resources. And here we use participatory inventory mapping, where communities map their own resources and then combine it with satellite data and machine learning to estimate how much resources exist in these forests for different industrial raw material that are already being extracted. But because it is completely distributed and fragmented, there is no sense of what is the size and scale of this economy, even at the landscape level. Forget about the economy-wide estimates. By using advanced technologies like combination of inventory mapping by community members with satellite data and machine learning, we provide communities with a precise estimate of what resources they already are contained in their forests, which allows them to build business plans in combination with and in collaboration with the private sector who are interested in these resources. Now, remember, because these resources are already part of industrial value chains, industrial actors are very interested in gaining access to higher quality raw material. And they are willing to sort of work with communities in helping them build these management plans and business plans based on the forest inventory mapping. So that's the third intervention that we are making, where communities get a precise estimate of what are the resources that they have. The fourth technology intervention that we are making is to improve traceability. And this is where the private sector is a major partner. By linking communities directly to private sector buyers, we want to build private sector commitment to community tenure, where they will come and enter into formal agreements with communities and community federations and commit to buying only from communities that have secure tenure. That further allows for traceability of these supply chains. And this is something that the private sector wants. And especially the intermediate industries, for example, that supply raw material to makers of final products like L'Oreal or Nestle and Body Shop. It's these larger global actors that are very keen for traceable supply chains. And in order to ensure sustainability, they also want it to be formal and visible. So the fourth technology intervention is to link communities and their federations directly to private sector actors through formal agreements for procurement in exchange for accountability and traceability. I'll just quickly recap. These are the four interventions. The first is to formalize the economy by using digital technology for record keeping and using digital transactions for payments that creates a record and allows communities to formalize and then build on this for capital and for access to resources. The second is mechanization to increase productivity of value adding at the local level and capture that value at the local level. The third is mapping the inventory of resources that exist using a combination of participatory mapping, satellite data, and machine learning to allow communities to build business plans that then they can go to industry partners with a precise understanding of their resources. And the fourth is improving traceability and accountability by bringing private sector actors, linking them directly to communities and their federation through formal agreements for procurement of forest-based raw material. All of this happens in the background of and builds on multi-stakeholder partnerships where we have state governments as our partners. In 4 states, we are working with government agencies who have the resources to support communities, both in providing tenure as well as in supporting them generate jobs, incomes, and livelihoods, and industry partners who have an interest in creating traceability in their supply chains and ensuring sustainability of the source of their raw material. All of this is happening in 4 states in India right now, and the partnerships include industrial buyers, state government agencies, and federations of local communities that will work together to use technology for making sure that once tenure is achieved, it goes on to create jobs, livelihoods, and incomes that create the incentives for communities themselves and the next generation to consolidate their tenure, not just economically, but also politically. So I will stop there, and I would love to hear questions and take comments.
First, let me just chip in. Thank you for this amazing and very, very concise presentation. That was very insightful. So, Björn, you raised your hand if you want to go ahead with a question.
Yes, I'd love to, and I'm sorry I have to leave pretty soon, but love the presentation. Very encouraging in many ways. The question I have is, how do you ensure that communities' negotiating power versus that of private sector interests is maintained? Because in general, sellers have a problem with power issues in relation to private sector. Thank you.
Björn, we cannot ensure that. We can only try. The effort that we put in place, and this is a side effect of technology, is transparency, is that we will make all of this available online so everyone can see, not just the communities and the part. None of this is secret. So we are going into the media. So the media is very interested in what is going on. Politicians are very interested in what is going on. And it is our biggest strength that once we throw light and make something transparent and visible, then other people will make sure that if there is anything, and of course we can only try, there is never going to be 100% guarantee that there will not be elite capture even within communities. We cannot guarantee that the political tide will not turn here and there. But overall, because tenure has already been established, all of this is built on tenure. This is not pre-tenure. The industry itself is now committed in this ambition and this vision. Industry itself is now committed to transparency, that they will make sure that what they are doing with industries is available for scrutiny by civil society. That is how I believe we will not ensure, but we will try our best to keep all stakeholders accountable to each other.
Excellent. Thank you for the response. Obviously, a huge challenge, both in Global South and in Global North, where many companies are exposed because they can't resist using their leverage. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I have to leave, so enjoy your afternoon. Bye.
Welcome.
Hi, Christiane, you raise your hand.
Yes, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. My name is Christiane Kesken from Robert Bosch Stiftung. I have one question. I would like to know, what does this approach means for communities or parts of communities that are not part of the company's value chains or that are not in the interest of the private sector?
We just talked about in the plenary, there is a lot of interest in IPLCs for a lot of different things. So you're right, absolutely, not all communities are part of industrial value chains. Many communities, at least in India, I can't speak of many other places, at least in India, many communities do not have a lot of resources. Their forests are degraded and they need resources and support to actually regenerate these forests. But fortunately, I believe, and I'm talking about the Indian context here, there are now spaces of hope and spaces of opportunity because of the alignment of the private sector's need for, let's say, resources that can be generated. So, for example, just briefly and quickly to answer, many parts of the country in India where forests are degraded, but communities are still very much attached and use the forest lands, their customary forests, used to have bamboo that were destroyed by industry itself, but in collaboration and cahoots with governments under a previous regime where the government owned the forest. But now if the community owns the forest, industry is actually keen to invest in growing bamboo back so that then they can enter into arrangements for the bamboo supply chains in the future rather than just in the present. This is just an example of how keen industries are, because there are two major shifts that are happening. One is industry broadly is looking for carbon substitutes, fossil fuel substitutes, and natural substitutes to fossil fuel uses. So wherever paraffin is being used now, natural fats are coming up as potential substitutes. Now they are more expensive right now, but because of the need to show that you are reducing the use of fossil fuels, natural fats suddenly become very attractive. And they can come from forests, they can be grown on forests. It only works in favor of communities if communities already have tenure and are federated, so that they have some collective bargaining power. And of course, the resources are in place for them to benefit from it. It will not happen automatically. It will, of course, not happen everywhere. But there is a lot of opportunity in the coming years, even in the next few years, if I may say so, where even where forests right now are not part of industrial value chains, it is possible for bringing industry on board to support communities to create these value chains, even where they don't exist.
Christiane, you're
follow-up
here
question, if you allow. Does it mean if communities create the added value and create business plans in cooperation with private partners, does it mean that we can expect automatically a sustainable and regenerative land use? Or can it also go in another direction?
It can go in any direction. We have to be careful and we have to be watchful. We cannot assume that it will be sustainable just because communities have tenure. Communities are also fragmented and they also are new to community tenure. So they have to get used to it and they have to get used to the technology as well. It cannot be assumed that it will be sustainable, but we cannot wait until we can assume that everything will be sustainable. We have to experiment. That is what we are trying to do. And put in place safeguards and monitoring so that we can see in real time if something is going wrong and take corrective action, which is why we need to set up pilots to experiment with these efforts before they can be scaled up.
Thank you very much for the question and the answer. I'm reading that we have about 5 more minutes left. So if you have any other questions, comments, maybe some reflections, how you could apply this new knowledge to your own situations, to cases that you're familiar with.
Felix, I see there are entries in the chat, but I'm not able to see them right now.
Sorry?
I see that there are some entries in the chat, but I'll have to get up and check them.
No,
but if
those
there are any
were-
questions.
No, they were like procedural early in the session because someone got lost in this group looking for French translation, which is only available in the plenary, sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought I'd jump in. I wanted to ask Ashwini, during the COVID pandemic, we saw a lot of reports about workers returning to rural areas, either from cities and or from abroad. And I just wondered, in terms of the technology and maybe if there have been youth returning to rural areas, if you've seen any sort of possibilities there, and or just some reflections on that would be interesting. Thank you.
So in my experience, at least in 2 states, the interest of government agencies, the higher level government officials, both elected and bureaucrats, in this vision of creating a forest-based economy on collective tenure is motivated by the involuntary migration that happened and the reverse, the violence of the reverse migration. This allows them to think about an alternative that did not exist in their vision earlier. Ways to reduce involuntary migration by creating local jobs. Right now, the government is really without ideas about how to create local jobs in these forest economies or places where forest dwellers are dominant. Largely, these spaces are seen as, leave breakout room, will close.
Just go on. We have you have 1 more minute to answer this very interesting question, and then we'll automatically get beamed to the.
So the reverse migration and the suffering actually provided us with an opportunity because it opened people's willingness to hear our idea and its potential. And they are bereft of ideas. There are no ideas on how to create jobs in these rural areas with forests and poverty. And the problem is that forests and poverty are coterminous. And what we are trying to show is that these are spaces of wealth. But this wealth is right now being extracted without any value left behind. That is why these places, the people are poor, but the forests are rich.